Hello everyone, my name is Wizomi.
And my name is Tomato.
And together we're Jongers by nature.
That's right.
Welcome everyone. This is episode 3. I can't believe we made it all the way to episode 3. That's quite an achievement. If you ever talk about milestones, 3 is where you can start counting. So last time we were discussing what our favorite Fukumoto works of all time are, but also what our personal rankings of our few favorites were. And as always, before we move on to the topic of today's episode, let's first give a little recap about what may have come on as new facts, new opinions since our last recording.
But just before we get into that, I think we need a little word from our sponsor for today's video.
This episode is sponsored by Raid Hazuso Legends, the game played by millions of debtors all around the globe. If you use the referral code ENDURE and sign up now, you will get 20 free summons. Can you get the legendary 5-star unit, All Green Hazuso? Download Raid Hazuso Legends now.
I do hope our audience isn't getting tired of the Hazuso adverts at this point.
Do you think?
Do you think it might be time to sort of stop doing it?
Yeah, honestly, the Hazuso joke is pretty dead. I think we should retire the bit.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, moving on. What happened last time? Yeah, top kaiju works and a few new chapters have released since then. A few new thoughts have been made. Maybe I'll start things off. Before we move to the big guns, I did want to take a moment to mention the Saga spin-off. Isn't this such a weird thing to exist? Would anybody have ever guessed for the Saga spin-off to come out how it is and feature an old man in a retirement home?
Well, I think you could say the same about the very first spin-off, which I believe was Tonegawa, right? And Otsuki, I believe, also came out around the same time. It's kind of hard to imagine that these very serious villains, Tonegawa with his absolutely powerful demeanor and harsh words like society is not your mother, you just have to win, being turned into just a comedy character dealing with little struggles as a middle manager, trying to remember everyone's names, dealing with an unreasonable boss who instead of, there's a little bit of reference to the kind of violent, sadistic nature of his in that series.
Of course.
But for the most part, it's just funny stuff like, well, I can't even remember. What does Hyodo want? Just
nonsense. He
Yeah.
wants to be brought to a theme park. He wants his orange juice. He wants his apple juice.
Exactly.
He wants his gigantic chalice of human blood to drink out of. Normal things that Hyodo wants, of course. But I fully get what you mean. I was referring less to the fact that we have a Fukumoto spin-off where we have an evil guy and then, or I don't know how much you want to classify Soga as evil, if like the most evil thing he maybe did in 10 was eat some tiles and cheat by eating the tiles. For the record, he didn't do that. But more so that we're regressing into older and older territories. We start with protagonists that are quite young. Akagi starts off as a literal teenager, Then the works have been progressively covering more older and older age groups of men, and now we're literally looking at the man in a retirement home. And maybe our audience can educate me on some more series that exist that cover old people in a retirement home, but this is definitely a first for me.
Yeah, and actually, now that we've mentioned Hyodo, that kind of does segue us into something which we might end up discussing over this episode. Maybe the difference between Hyodo as he's introduced earlier on in Kaiji Parts 1 and 2, and the way he's sort of become in Part 6.
Oh, yes.
How he treats Endo and stuff like that.
This will be interesting. I'm excited to hear your opinions about that, but just to make things clear, I actually enjoy the raws that I have read of the Soga spin-off so far, because it is just a little bit of mahjong. We are getting a few scraps of, not even written by Fukumoto himself, but I take anything at this point. And I do like Soga as a character, but yeah, I keep forgetting the spin-off exists, and its existence does not affect my top rankings whatsoever, but I did want to take a moment to talk about it. Anything else left open that we want to mention?
Well, as our viewers probably know, Nikaido is currently in the process of being written by Fukumoto Sensei himself, and also being translated by the Fukumoto Crazy translation team.
The legendary team.
Yeah, and since our last episode, we've had some new chapters, so maybe let's talk a bit about those.
Yeah, I must say I am quite happy with the direction that the series is going so far.
Yes.
I do like. I've seen a few raw images, so I think golfing is going to be a topic again in the future. We're not completely removed from that, but I love the way that Nikaido's ability to endure transfers into the new job that he's taken over. It is a little bit creepy thinking about how his sole motivation is Kafka, and like how he basically springs up in joy once he like finds out via one of his old acquaintances where she works, like immediately goes there. But I mean, she points out and calls him out for that right away also. So it's not like she is completely oblivious to that, but she like immediately calls him out for the fact that that's kind of a fucked up behavior. But in and of itself, the way that Nikaido performs at the job itself is quite inspiring and nice to see. And of course, Nikaido isn't someone that you should fully idolize 100%. He's not like many of Fukumoto's best characters. He's not without flaws.
Of course.
Anything you want to say regarding the news chapters?
I do like the way, well, I suppose this isn't totally unlike Kurosawa, but I do like the way that we're getting a sort of storyline about a character which is not an amazing superhero. Like, just to name some obvious examples, we have Akagi,
we have
you don't have to touch it, it's fine.
all right.
Yeah, as I was saying,
Don't take that out of context.
No, we're definitely cutting that. That's weird.
Cheers.
We're just gonna have a random.
Oh wait, let me give a little bit so we continue.
And we're back.
Still not.
And we're back. Sorry for the short break. We just needed to refresh ourselves and recharge our energies.
Absolutely.
As I was saying, yeah.
Will you believe it? I got 5-star Hazuso. No. Okay.
Come on, get off the game. We need to focus on the podcast.
Sure.
Man.
The bit is over.
Always playing on Hazuso Shadow Legends or whatever it's called.
It's good.
Yeah, well, of course, Nikaido is quite a departure from the usual superhero type. Well, maybe not superhero, because that sort of conjures the image of something with superpowers,
Yeah.
like Superman or Spider-Man. No, but like a hero who can do it all and triumph over his enemies in the way that he wants. So, of course, obvious example is Akagi. Akagi pretty much always defeats his opponents, is always one step ahead of them. Kaiji, of course, struggles a lot, gets betrayed at first and goes through some painful experiences, but in the end, you know, he's pretty successful. Right now, he's still in part 6 evading Tei, trying to get away from them, but he seems to be doing a good job. He's done a good job so far, managing to win, what was it, 2.4 billion yen. And obviously Zero, Rei, or whatever.
Nil non, yeah.
He just always wins. But yeah, so
and even his little rival Shirube, he's also like seen as this genius kid.
So Nikaido, on the other hand, is someone who just isn't able to succeed. He doesn't have the secret source. He doesn't have the ability to see what his opponents doesn't see and take advantage and beat them. No, he hasn't managed to carve out success in that conventional way that we have come to expect from other Fukumoto characters. No, it's more so that he's failed and failed and failed, and he's now, I suppose, the most recent direction that it's taking is he's kind of coming to terms with that failure and trying to accept it and live a good life as a quote-unquote failure.
Yeah, he has the power of failure on his side, so to say. So
I was going to say that's not too unlike Kurosawa, but then again, you do see Kurosawa triumphing over the delinquents in the original series, and then the what would you call them? The NEETs who end up attacking the homeless camp. He ends up achieving a glorious victory, as you see in Kaiji and Akagi and Gintokin and Zero. But yeah, in the case of Nikaido, that doesn't really happen as such. So it's very interesting to kind of see a story like this with a different sort of pace.
Just a final comment before we fully move on to today's topic. I just wanted to address that this exact thing being so nice is also what's going to make the following chapters of Shin Kurosawa incredibly epic. Trust me on this one. You heard it here first, guys. And you heard it in the last episode also. But let's move on to today's topic. I don't think that I have explicitly mentioned it, but we will be talking all about Kaiji. It's the Kaiji so to say.
Well, they're going to see it in the video title, aren't they?
True. So you guys will probably know more than us. Maybe you just found the thumbnail nice and clicked on it. But we will be going systematically, chronologically, through all of the different Kaiji parts. And yeah, basically we'll be giving our opinions. Tomato has not maybe an explicit ranking. For me, I have a little bit more of a before the recording, I explicitly gave each of the parts like a mental ranking where I would put it, comparing them against each other. But who knows? Maybe this will change over the course of today's discussion, and I'm quite curious to get to it. Just as a quick disclaimer for both of us, it has been a little while since we consumed all these Kaiji parts, so we will be going off of our memory for a lot of this, but that will also make sure that the parts that have really stuck with us determine our opinions of these parts. So maybe we will be coming back to this topic in the future with a fresh view of eyes, but today we will be going based on what our opinion is right now. Starting things off with Kaiji Part 1.
Yeah.
So, what is there to say about Kaiji Part 1? Kaiji, the absolute bum, destroying richest people's cars, gets basically poached by Endo.
Yes.
Goes onto the Espora with the promise of fully getting redemption of all the debt that he has accumulated, maybe even going out with a plus, being quite overwhelmed with everything at the beginning, being very impressed by, or at least having not impressed, but Tonegawa's speech leaving an impression on Kaiji, let's put it this way, getting a reality check, and moving all the way on and fighting in the second half of Part 1 his way all the way up to Hyodo and eventually challenging him at the end. Quite an eventful part.
So what you mentioned about the beginning, about Endo poaching him, as you say, I think that's this is why I mentioned in the previous episode about seeing Gintokin as a coming-of-age story. In the same way, I would consider Kaiji to have started as a coming-of-age story. I would say the groundwork was laid in Part 1, 2, sort of 3 and 4-ish. About the groundwork was laid to see Kaiji kind of go from this naive bum, loser, can't get a job, blah blah blah, to someone who is actually successful. But I think maybe that course was not really continued upon, because we sort of see okay, we're talking about part 1 now. We
Mhm.
think forward to part 6. What is he like in part 6? Has he really matured? I mean, he's sort of managed to develop an aptitude for gambling games, but other than that, he's just the same old dude, and then he gets into a bunch of comedic misunderstandings.
As he does in
Uh,
Kaiji Part 2, and as he does in the coming
So-
of age phase of his story. I see
So I
what you
think
mean.
it was interesting because you see from the beginning, actually, he does have quite a sense of development during even part 1 on its own, because of course at the beginning he's manipulated by Endo. He's naive enough to think that Endo is like looking out for his best interests. Oh, okay. Oh, you want to get on the cruise? Okay, I'll do it just for you. You know,
Yeah.
I'll see if there's a spot. Just because I want to help you. You know.
Yeah.
And then he's betrayed by, what was the guy's name?
Ando?
No, before
No.
that, the
The yellow jacket guy, right?
begins with J.
The yellow jacket bearded guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funai.
Funai.
I don't know why I thought it began with J.
Yeah, that
Funai.
threw me off guard. Funai, yes. That's like the first time he really gets a wake up call. But he already seems like, I say that, but already the very first bold decision Kaiji makes is to take all the maximum amount of money that he can take for this restricted rock, paper, scissors
Yes.
gamble. And that is already quite a bold move. Why do you think he decided to do that?
I think, there's a certain number of themes or messages that appear across all of Fukumoto's work. And I think in this case, this is a certain mindset of, well, what do they say at the very beginning of Akagi? You'll die if you only try to survive. You have to try to win. Let's go to Kurosawa now when he's having the fight with Nakata. At first, he's just trying to stop Nakata from hitting him in the head, but then eventually he realizes that if he wants to get out of this fight safe, he needs to change his mindset from surviving to winning.
You mean Nakane, right?
Did I say Nakata?
Yeah, Nakane. Just to
Nakane.
clear.
I forgot his name.
No worries.
So yeah, I think this is the Kaiji's mindset. I think a lot of the other people on the cruise, probably a bunch of salarymen who've spent their life trying not to take risks, trying not to rock the boat, trying to fit in, have sort of, they have the mindset, oh, I just need to survive, I just need to get through this. And then at the end, apparently the debt gets erased. Of course, you can gain new debt when you're on the ship, but if I can just get through this and survive, then my debt will be erased. I'll be okay. I'll just keep my head down, try not to do anything too crazy. But then Kaiji has a different mindset. He realizes that this is a fight for survival, and in a fight for survival, you can't just do the bare minimum and keep your head down and try not to be noticed and try and let things pass you by. You have to take an active approach and actively try to win rather than kind of stay out the way.
And I mean, that's what gives him a very high burst of motivation at the beginning. Then he gets slaps in the face, then he gets bursts of motivation, then he gets slapped more in the face, and in the end he ends up naked in a gigantic glass.
Yes.
It actually reminds me of the Buraiden guy, dog's prison, or what they call it, with the
dog room, I think.
The dog room, with the naked men in the plastic enclosed casing.
Yeah.
I mean, the Espoir is absolutely awesome. I must say, we can already start talking about like how potentially the manga versus the anime will impact our impressions of this.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like for the anime they always show this gigantic statue in the middle of the Espoir. I don't know if you remember watching it,
I
but
do remember.
almost every episode like begins and ends and has its intermission with shots of the gigantic golden statue in the CGI.
No, you know what I'm thinking of? I'm thinking of, now that you mentioned the shot coming up again and again of the... Is it a statue?
Is that the fountain?
I was about to say, is it a fountain?
Yeah, the golden thing.
Well, anyway, in season 2, there's quite a lot of shots of Mikoko, and sometimes, in wearing not very many clothes.
Yes.
And I think that's really funny because I bet there's a lot of people who have only watched the anime and
Yeah.
potentially don't even know that the manga exists. So they must be thinking, who the hell is this woman? Why is she revealing so much of her body to us?
Yes.
And then it's later revealed that it's Mikoko. But then,
Yeah.
sort of, why do we have to see her in this way? Mikoko in season 2,
Yeah.
the role that she plays is just as a sort of joke, like, oh, this is my daughter. I love her so much. Isn't she beautiful?
It's really weird.
Ugh,
Yeah.
she's disgusting.
Yeah.
And so that's the only thing that she is, and yet we see like lots of, even the whole ending sequence is, which is probably very confusing to people who haven't read the manga. But yeah, that's just a reference to kind of the actual relationship between them in the beginning of part 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just funny when you mentioned the shot that came up again and again in season 1. That made me think of the shot that came up again and again in season 2.
I mean, there will be quite a significant part when talking about part 2 that has been left out of the anime compared to the manga. But for part 1, we need to then continue on talking about Brave Man Road and also E-Card and the lottery. So
yes,
maybe just as a quick comment to the audience, I have actually ranked part 1 as my number 2 spot favorite out of all of them. I just think the variety is legendary. I like both the gambles of epic lengths, but I also like the very short bursts of many different types of gambles, and part 1 just absolutely nails it. Earlier on, I actually really enjoyed Brave Man Road because I felt like it was a little bit unique in the sense that it was not something in the direction of like a board game, but like a, let's say, physical challenge where the gamble came in, where it's like not necessarily a gamble. But then with part 6 having like these mini gambles, like the car chase sequences or the endo tree jumping gamble, this lost a little bit of its novelty for me. And of course, nowadays I think about Brave Man Road, I always think about the stupid glass stairs. And I will ask you again the question, why do you think Fukumoto put these glass stairs as the resolution for Brave Man Road? What would you think?
Do you have any ideas?
I mean, he maybe leaned in a little bit too heavy because he loves to talk about the pie in the sky and that you should never think too much about the pie in the sky. You should always think about, the misery that life can throw at you. And so when he was thinking of how to put this metaphor into Brave Man Road, thinking about victory is just in reach, then this didn't necessarily drive him to think up this concept of the glass stairs, but definitely think of, okay, the ending is not what it seems. And then, where do you go from there? You're on a steel beam which electrocutes you when you touch it with your hands, but the ending is not the ending. Like, what more can you do? Maybe he could have just put a normal ladder, but I would assume that this glass ladder has some more deeper meaning actually, but it would be quite funny if there is no deeper meaning at all and Fukumoto is just laughing thinking of people trying to understand why he put it there.
No, okay.
It's almost heavenly, it's like heavenly stairs that Kaiji suddenly walks up to separate himself from everyone that has failed before him, but that's maybe stretching it.
Well, again, drawing the parallel from Akagi, going back to what he said about trying to win rather than just survive, the way that it was phrased in Akagi is you have to throw yourself away, you have to die in order to live. So I think there was a similar state of affairs in Kaiji, because he only sees the stairs, I believe, when he's kind of given up, right? I think that's what was said. So it's sort of the idea of just thinking outside the box. Sometimes you have to, instead of just focusing on the conventional path that society tells you to look at, maybe look at other things which they didn't necessarily mention or tell you about.
Yeah.
Another thing is, just that like life is not always going to be that easy. You know,
Yeah.
you might have a goal in mind, but sometimes it's not that simple and things get in the way. Yeah, I think that's the sort of message that
I think the
was being
only reason
illustrated.
it's this off-putting is that normally, okay, it's also a lie saying that the Kaiji series is like completely grounded. You don't have a gigantic underground kingdom being developed anywhere, you know, and Kyoto has infinite money and can buy everything, so he can buy this magic acrylic plastic glass stairs that doesn't break when you step on it. So maybe the point with because I was thinking why it sticks so out, I was thinking, oh, because the rest of Kaiji is so grounded in reality otherwise, but it isn't really.
You know what would be really interesting? I just realized. What if the glass stairs were there, and actually, what the intention of them was actually as a decoy, going back to what you said, the pie in the sky, the event that randomly, the Deus ex machina, I'm saved because some random ass pull has come to me, and I'm suddenly I don't have to do what I was doing before. Suddenly I can just go up these glass stairs
skip the last
to
steps,
go to heaven, to be saved, you know? But maybe it would be interesting if maybe one of the other characters, not Kaiji, maybe Sahara, saw the stairs. Oh, look, there's some glass stairs. That's what this gamble was all about. You're supposed to see the stairs and go up. And actually, maybe they were extremely brittle and they would have shattered as soon as he... That would have been interesting. And actually, if this gamble is, set up by Hyodo to test the ability of Kaiji, then... who knows? Maybe that could have been his way of testing. Are you naive enough to think that these glass stairs are gonna save you, or are you gonna keep going?
Honestly, I like that. You could go even crazier and then say, because there are stairs on both sides, that only one of them actually works, and you are already making the most important decision right at the beginning of the gamble if you want to cross on the right steel beam or on the left steel beam. That sounds like a cool thing that Hyodo would also do.
No, I don't think so, because I think he wants to test the ability, the kind of decision-making ability, like logical ability to kind of see what the correct path is. But whereas if
he will still say fair,
mentioned,
you say.
Huh?
You say like he's ruthless but still fair.
Fair, yeah.
We will talk about the lottery in just a bit.
What I mean is, in that situation, it would be completely left up to luck whether one of them, because 5 of them are on one steel beam and 5 of them are on the other. So, oh wait, you said on both sides?
No,
because there were 2 steel beams,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
But the stairs are on. There's 2 sets of stairs. One on the outer side. One each.
Exactly.
On each outer side.
Exactly.
So so basically, depending on what beam, if you choose left or right, it's just left up to chance. There's no real way to tell logically.
If he would have put in the story element, maybe it would be like, oh, some cue that Tonegawa gave, or if you look at the beginning of the steel beam.
No, see, I like that about Kaiji, because the kind of logical, methodical ways that people win their gambles is not just some random, he lifted up his right hand when he said that, so...
I find this incredibly funny that we are talking about it this way when the thing we are talking about is the random glass stairs coming out of nowhere. I think we discussed it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It could have gone either way. The stairs could have also been a decoy. So,
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. And
so I'm not a huge fan of the stairs, actually. And also, I need to say this: the air blowing outwards Surely it should blow inwards, right?
It is
Don't
really
you
weird.
think?
It is really weird. I'm no aerodynamics guy, so I don't know.
I think the example that's mentioned in the manga and the anime is comparing it to like a subway or an underground where even what did they say? They said even though it's moving, then it pushes you outwards.
Huh.
I think what they refer to is like when you're standing outside of the like underground station, like in the steps, on the steps, then you feel the wind blowing outwards towards you. I think that's what they say. But the thing is, I think that's because there's motion inside the subway, right? You see the trains are moving, and that's what is causing you to be blown backwards. But in the case of the steel beam crossing, the wind is like outside
Yeah.
where they're crossing the thing. So like when you open the door, I would think that the wind goes in.
Before any physicists come running and screaming at us,
No, dude, please come and
Of
like
course,
correct me because
but-
I think that it should have been the other way around.
I'll
I'd be curious.
I'll leave it in my mind that Tei had like the choice to control it freely with just some thermodynamics bullshit by deciding if the air is warmer or colder on the inside, which allows them to actually freely modify the way that the air would be flowing. So I don't know which way would be the correct way, but by having the opportunity to control the air temperature on the inside, they will have this ability to control the airflow as ruthlessly as they want. This is how I just leave it in the back of my mind. And I do feel like we have right here the most extensive discussion of the glass stairs so far featured on the entire internet. We can be proud of this, but we should move on to, in my opinion, the best part of Kaiji Part 1, E-Card.
Yeah.
So Kaiji finally gets his first facing off against one of the big guys, and it's the man, the myth, the legend himself, Tonegawa. And I really like that like it starts already with the choice that he can make in the beginning if he wants to have like this device on his eye or in his ear. And I always think, how would Tonegawa like track his heart rate if it was on his eye, if it would work similarly. But once again, we're like losing ourselves in the nitty-gritty technological details of how these things could have been done. But I like the idea of wagering like the distance, that it's quite creative. Then the game itself is very simple to grasp. I actually recently read a manga that tried to replicate E-Card. So it was a chapter of Junket Bank. Maybe some of our audience have read some of it before, where they played a game where you have a genie card, you have gold cards, and you have like a king card, but like the ratio of cards in play was different than E-Card. And then they didn't bet centimeters, but they bet, or like when they won gold, it would pile up at the top of them. And when one of them loses, all of it would come crashing down on them. And if it's too much, they will die. And I mean, this arc is not fully translated yet, so I have not read it in its entirety, but it felt nowhere near as clear as the way that E-Card was, and that E-Card made us understand all the mental games that were going around this. For Junket Bag, they have like pages full of these schematics trying to explain all the different possibilities. Oh, if this and this happens, then this and this can happen. But for E-Card, it's straight to the point, and I also like the way that Kaiji outsmarts Tonegawa in the end. It is he has to sacrifice something for it, and it's, if I give a ranking of the games in part 1, it will be E-Card, Restricted Rock Paper Scissor, Brave Man Road, and then the lottery.
Yeah. Oh, that's your ranking.
I like rankings, but you can also just talk about E-Card, man.
E-Card, I mean, what's there to say? I think you've sort of covered it pretty well.
We haven't talked about Tonegawa's punishment.
Oh yeah,
which I think is an incredibly epic scene. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, you actually see Kaiji showing some sympathy for Tonegawa because he kind of saw it as, Tonegawa was always under the boot of this president guy.
Yeah. And you can say about the Tonegawa spin-off what you will. If you read the ending, it's nice to see that Tonegawa is at least still alive, you know? Or at least it's implied. Who knows where it is timeline? No, timeline-wise, the spin-off happens after Kaiji because of, but maybe
But
it's an alternate universe.
It's also not canon.
Yeah, exactly.
Smartphones in the underground mine.
Exactly.
Watching Netflix.
And then we move on. So sorry that we covered the glass there so detail in such a high detail, but we skip over E-card a little bit. But I want to hear your opinion on the lottery. Do you think it was reasonable and smart that Kaiji decided to challenge Hyodo? Why do you think Kaiji challenged Hyodo? And how do you think he was suddenly outsmarted? Is it very typical for Kaiji?
Well, I would say, of course, he was going to get outsmarted because. Okay, so again, we're going to get into the different kind of representation, how the. Are we calling him the chairman? I'm just going to Hyodo.
Yeah.
How he's represented in part 1 and 2, and how he's represented later on, and also in the Tonegawa spin-off.
Yeah.
I don't really agree. I don't think it's reasonable seeing what he sort of became in part 6, you know, basically, which is more similar to the parody in Tonegawa, where he's just like, just so unreasonable, and no one can even have a conversation with him.
I haven't used this word in a long time, but they flanderized his character. They like put him down to like draw a caricature of Hyodo in your
caricature.
mind.
That's it.
Yeah,
like that's actually, I really don't like it when there's a villain like that in a story where he's just so evil but also so stupid. And how did this villain amass all this power if he's so stupid? Well, I don't know.
And
right?
we don't get to learn a lot about
it's so
his
unfair that this villain has all this power, right? And it just somehow happened, right?
For Washizu, at least, we actually learn that he was a fantastic, super smart, charismatic businessman in the past. And I mean, it's also the Washizu, and comparing like Washizu and Hyodo and all the main villains, it's in and of itself. But we know a lot more about Washizu's backstory than we know about Hyodo. He had a family and he was on a cruise on a ship one day. Was Hyodo even on that cruise ship also?
I don't know. That happens later, so I kind of don't take it as seriously.
Already? Okay, so the only true Hyodo is like in, let's say, part 1 and part 2.
For me, yes. Yeah, so going back, so at that point, Hyodo is still someone to be taken seriously, right? In terms of the way he's represented. He's someone, yes, he's like a bit he's quite crazy about money and power, and using that power to like build the underground kingdom. That's sort of mentioned in the beginning of part 2. But, you know, even he didn't become so powerful and so rich by accident. He knows about how people think and how to use that to his advantage. And so that's why I think, of course, Kaiji was going to lose at that lottery, because Hyodo saw his desperation, right? He didn't think that Kaiji's gonna like just leave it up to chance, right? All of these gambles have been, sometimes on the surface it seems at first that like you just, okay, this is something that's going to be left up to chance, right? The rock paper scissors, well, I just choose a random card, right, and hope that I win. But actually you need to like think about strategies, right? What other people are doing and how you're going to compare to that, and also look more intricately at the rules of the game. If you finish with 2 stars, then you still have the opportunity to buy another star.
Time.
And also, if you're like exchanging cards is allowed and stuff like that, think more intricately about the rules, right? It wasn't just a game of chance, right? Even though it might have seemed that way on the surface at the very beginning. What else? Same with the what was it called? No, not Brave Man Road, but the
E-card.
No, the one just before it.
The
was
race.
Was that still called Brave Man Road? I think actually it was. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think that the initial one is called like Brave Man Road with the yellow steel beam, and then it's just like the second part, the secret part.
Yeah. So that seems like, just not a game of chance, but a game of just being able to balance, right? But then you get the idea of pushing and stuff like that. And then E-card again also seems random, but with a bit of thinking. But yeah, so of course Kaiji is not going to leave it up to chance, right? He doesn't want to leave things up to chance when he has not only his own honor but also Ishida's honor.
Yes, of course.
He's like trying to do it for Ishida's family. So Hyodo sees this desperation and he knows that Kaiji has some kind of a plan. And of course, he's very old and experienced, so he figures it out. I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I really do like I think I touched upon this in the last episode, the way he tried to dress it up in an aura of mystery. Like, I have the luck of a king. Of course I will do that.
Yes.
But Kaiji does figure it out.
Yes.
So that shows Kaiji maturing from his naive state at the beginning, where he sort of trusts other people to help him out, and maybe I'll sort of leave it to chance or leave someone else to take care of it for me, to realizing that actually he had the chance to win. Basically, he had the chance to do it, he just didn't think hard enough.
Fukumoto really, and we have talked about this in the very first episode, has an obsession with hands. Not only because hands, when playing Mahjong, are a very, very prominent item, but also when I think of the lottery, I just think about Hyodo's hand inside this lottery box, and I think the anime did actually a very good job in displaying this. I very vividly can picture the way that Hyodo's hand looks when I try to remember it. Then of course you have in Washizu Mahjong you have the hands, but then you also have like the betting, like the torture device with the fingernail getting pierced. And so they're all like these very vivid images of hands in my mind when I think of it. It's just something that crossed my mind because we were featuring this as a prominent point in a past episode. But I think you wrapped up nicely everything there is to say about. I mean, not everything.
Because you asked me the question of whether you thought it was.
I agree with everything. Yeah.
So you don't have anything to add?
I mean, we will get to the comparison of caricature Hyodo versus original Hyodo when we come to it. I think we should for now move on to part 2.
Okay.
So, maybe do you want to try to recap a little bit what happened in part 2? Otherwise, like,
I think you're better at recapping.
Yeah, no worries. So, we enter Kaiji, who actually, how does it start at the?
It starts with Kaiji. Is he playing pachinko? What is he doing? He's in the manga.
Maybe it mixes a little bit with how the different. Also, the movie is different, and then.
Well, the movie's its own thing.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Set in
the
China,
drama,
right? Kaiji is just bumming around, trying to
Kaiji bums around and is in the underground.
Trying to find a Goomball. Yeah, I lost that Goomball, but like I'll win next time, you know. And he ends up. He finds Endo. He manages to get Endo's attention by vandalizing every car except for his.
Again.
That's in the manga.
Yeah.
Oh, now I remember how the manga started. Yeah. It's with Hyodo giving that speech about how money is very important.
Yes, of course. How could we forget the most vital part? And if you take the existence of this part into consideration, of course, part 2 becomes the best Kaiji part of all time, no diff. Because we figure out the intricacies behind the man who put Teia's principles into procedure and put them into action for them, Hasesu Ryosu. the most important kaiji character of them all, but we swore to not be talking about him, so his greatness will not be taken into consideration when talking about the rest of Kaiji Part 2. But I really enjoyed the speech, and I'm quite, I know we've been using the word bum a lot, bummed out that the anime does not feature it. I feel like anime only watchers are missing out a lot by that. But I think for time's sake, we just moved to Kaiji in the Underground.
Yes.
Playing Shinchedorin, or actually first living in the underground, of course, and being at first thinking, I'm just gonna save up, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna change myself, I'm gonna save up and get out of here. But he immediately fails the moment he falls into the psychological trap that Otsuki and his two buddies come up with, and that they also very prominently abuse in the Foreman outing manga, where a lot of it is going actually into the intricacies about how they're always scamming the denizens of the underground of their money. So Kaiji realizes, okay, I need to win big, and I need allies, similarly to what he was thinking on Diaspora. So he starts up connecting with the, what's the number again? How do they call themselves?
The 45ers.
The 45ers, exactly. To come up with this scheme, you have these shots of them like preparing their big day, where they're observing. Of course, Kaiji observes a lot the Shinchedorin games that Otsuki hosts, and he gets his attention also, in the cafeteria and the canteen. He makes a fuss about the food, and before we move on to the actual game of Shinchiro, do you have any opinions on how Kaiji plans his usurp of Otsuki and to win big in one shot, as he always tries to do?
So two things I want to mention. First, maybe it's so obvious that I shouldn't even say it, but like his beginnings in the underground, where he's trying to save up money and just get through things. Going back to what I said earlier, just keep your head down and try to survive. I think that's obviously reflective of someone trying to make a living in society. You try and, okay, I have some goals that I have, so I need to just go to my job and save up money, but that does drain you, that does take it out of you. Maybe if you have a job, a full-time job, the conditions aren't as bad as the digging holes underground where the air quality is bad and all that. But it does take it out of you, and then it's very easy to get, you might have a goal. Oh, I'm saving up my money so I can do this, that, and that. But actually, oh, I'm so tired after work, and I'm like bogged down. I'm bummed out. I need a stress reliever. Let me go and like buy some takeaway food, some beer, and then later they get introduced to the gambling night. So like, of course,
he hops onto that.
Pachinko is a very big thing in Japan. A lot of people like just go there and waste their money on what's essentially a slot machine, right? The house always wins. And
even when you don't go all the way to Pachi slot, just even going to a regular arcade, there are like and I am guilty of this, just regular arcades where there's no age restriction to go. They have a lot of these Mahjong arcade cabinets where you can play Mahjong on the arcade, where essentially like you can, if you play it, you pay money to play it, and you can win points, like you can win stuff in the Pachi slot, but the winnings are mainly used to just continue playing. And if you don't get enough through your wins to continue playing, you have to continue to pay. So it's a complete waste of money, but it hooks you, man. When I played Mahjong Fight Girl, I was hooked on my last day in Sapporo. It was fucking great, and I do want to play it again. But I digress. So Kaiji mans up finally and comes up with the help of his friends.
And
He thinks they're his
that's
friends.
the second thing I wanted to mention. I think it's very interesting that he's managed to find some strangers to put his trust into again. Which is what he did at the beginning with Funai. I don't
And
really
Ando.
like this guy, but I'll trust him for this little scheme that we've got.
Yeah.
And then, in a more complete way, he put his trust into Furuhata and Ando. And Furuhata, he at least worked with for a while. But Ando is just some dude he doesn't know.
That's some fat, ugly bastard.
No,
man.
we're all in this together. If I win these 2 stars, that means the team hasn't won yet. I need to give you the 2 stars, and we haven't won until we all get 9 stars, guys. And then what does that end up with him? How does that end for him? He ends up in the dog room. Yeah.
And he does
I'll
it
say
all
no
again.
more about that, but and somehow he's done the same thing in just come together with some people who are literally strangers to him.
Yeah.
I think that sort of speaks to the human condition, because really there's no reason to fully trust someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'd be safest, you'd be most protected from danger if you just don't connect with anyone, you don't trust anyone, you don't share things with anyone. But at the same time,
that comes at a cost.
Yeah, you also can't do anything that I suppose there are some things you can do alone, but a lot of the great things in life involve taking that risky step of trusting someone.
Exactly.
Whether it's a romantic relationship, you have to talk to each other and share things about each other, or whether it's about cooperating. If you think about cities and all the buildings, and that needs to be planned out, that needs to be the architect needs to.
All of humanity builds on collaboration and cooperation.
Exactly.
Apes together strong. It is how it is. So it is almost more of a luxury that has developed these days, that you can even consider not trusting anyone and just living on your own. Back in the day, when you were the one that's alone in the group, the wild beasts are going to get you and kill you. So it's actually more of a luxury that has developed recently. But
so I suppose Kaiji didn't have much of a choice.
Exactly.
Even though he's been betrayed in the past, he needed to come together, join forces with some other people, and he found some people who were victimized in the same way he was, in terms of being in debt so far to the point where they have to give up half of their paycheck just to pay interest.
Yeah. And this brings us to the showdown against Otsuki, Numakawa, and I always forget
Isawa.
Isawa, yeah, exactly. And I must say, we mentioned before this recording that the spin-offs are almost deserve their own episode entirely, and you can say what you will, but the Ichijo and Otsuki spin-offs have actually increased my enjoyment of them in part 2, because no matter what the actual content of the spin-offs is, and if it's in an alternate universe or not, the character itself actually feels, compared to, for example, Hyodo, who has been caricaturized, they feel, and this is specifically Otsuki and Ichijo.
Ichijo?
Ichijo also.
What about Tonegawa? What do you think?
This is why I'm mentioning these two specifically. Okay. I think it does a really a good job to keep their characters relatively true to their nature in the original series. Tonegawa, not so much. We mentioned this at the beginning when we were talking about the Soga spin-off and the evil guys. So maybe they had to find their groove a little bit, or it's that they wanted to go a little bit more in the, let's say, slice of life direction than just pure comedy. Why Otsuki and Ichijo are feel like more of themselves, and just by experiencing more of themselves and how they interact with other people and how they see the world, we get to know them better, and this allows me to enjoy them in part 2 much, much more. And I'm seeing at where I like put part 2 in my imaginary ranking, and I don't even want to mention this because this is like a revelation I'm having right now as we're talking about it, that I previously I didn't really care about Otsuki and Ichijo. I know Ichijo has his group of fans, but as characters, I always felt like they were really underdeveloped, and it was just like, okay, generic evil fat guy that's kind of greedy, and has like his little scheme, and a generic guy who's like arrogant and pretty and cannot and hates to lose. That was what I thought, and of course, I still think of them that way, but it's nice to see their other faces. So, long story short, I really like Otsuki, and it's of course even more satisfying. It's probably almost the most satisfying takedown of any Kaiji bad guy in the series to see Kaiji beat Otsuki. But what do you think?
About what?
About how satisfying it is compared to other beatdowns, and also
Yeah,
if you like Otsuki.
It was fantastic. The anime, I think, did it so well.
Yeah.
Just like, first of all, the kind of patheticness. He's like, no, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. And he smiles and kind of like looks at everyone as if it's gonna have some validity. Like, God, right? It doesn't count. Guys, are you with me on this one? And the kind of silence reaction for a few seconds, and then the eruption explosion of throwing stuff at him and telling him to shut up. That was done brilliant. I loved it. Yeah. And then the aftermath of like, okay, so they didn't accept that, and then there's a bit of silence, like Kaiji and the other foreman are discussing what to do, but then this kind of like atmosphere is like broken with like just one or two guys throwing the occasional shut up, throwing a beer bottle and making him bleed.
Yeah, well deserved at this point, even though he like is shown as a nice guy to his friends later on in the spin-off. The way he like very in the spin-off doesn't, I will stop talking about the spin-off soon, don't worry. It doesn't shy away and still portraying him as quite ruthless in exploiting. They're often like, he's often pitched against other foremen underground who are for example just very passionate. There's one foreman who, it's like the entire chapter is like a Yu-Gi-Oh parody, and you have this one foreman who just wants is like an artist and wants to make Yu-Gi-Oh cards out of his childhood underground monster drawings. And this is silly in and of itself, of course, but Otsuki goes to him and he always is like the ruthless businessman, and he basically, the manga says it, Otsuki wants to freeload by basically saying, oh, I can help you make a business out of this, and he like constantly exploits people all the time. So he really gets what he deserves when he faces off against Kaiji and gets taken down. Do you like Chinchiro as a game? Do you think it is interesting? Compared to the things we had previously, because it is technically more complicated with all of these different, it's actually the first gamble where we have like different score values come into play of different hands. So at that point in time it was the most complicated gamble.
I think, yeah, I do like that kind of intricacy, the way the dealer plays twice and then it rotates. Yeah, like everyone's up against the dealer and all the different values. I do like that about it, but I'm not a fan of how it's really down to chance. Like, it ultimately, there's no way for you to know what the dice roll will be, unless of course you're using rigged dice. But other than that, it's ultimately just down to chance and like your kind of feeling, which has no logical basis.
And the amount of team play is also not so like there's not too much of mind games possible without introducing actual cheating into the game and new props like the. So basically the chiseling of the bone dice introduced a new prop into the gamble.
I like the symbolism of that, because of course he probably could have found something else to make the dice with, right? He didn't, but he specifically used the bone from the steaks that the foreman and his assistant foreman were eating from, and for ink he used the blood of his comrades, of which there were 6 in total, including himself, Kaiji.
I never thought about that, even though it's quite face value.
That was a great bit of sentimentalism.
True. Yeah, I have more respect for that set of dice now. Okay, yeah. Kaiji beats Otsuki and gets his ticket to freedom. I actually also really like the concept of Perika, by the way, and the underground money. I'm obsessed with Perika. It's actually something that exists in real life also. Perika is a terminology that is used for this sort of temporary imaginary currency. So it is not something that Kaiji came up with completely, but then it's just like the Hyodo Tei Perika, and that all he gets in the end is actually the chance to go out for a single day to try to regain his freedom and of all his the other 45ers. So just by default, the stakes are already extremely high when he goes out to try to win. I think it's more than one day though, right? He has like it's multiple days. Because
I think he has more than 10 days.
10 days, yeah.
More than that.
Yeah, sorry for correcting. Yeah, still, he has a limited amount of time. My mind was still at 1 day outing foreman, but yeah, he has enough for, so he is out for multiple days before he would get dragged back, because otherwise his entire super intricate plan wouldn't really work out. But yeah, he, meets the Borg and all his. Well,
he meets someone else first.
Yeah. Who knows? Would the old man have been more happy to not have met Kaiji in the first place, or would he not be where he is now without Kaiji?
No, definitely happy to meet Kaiji, because I mean, he would have failed, right? I mean, because he had his original plan,
with the magnet,
and then that failed, but then he kept going because he was crazed. He just felt like, oh, okay, my plans failed. Well, I'll just do my best. Maybe I'll get lucky.
Yeah.
Which, of course, Ichijo would never allow to happen.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So Sakazaki would be screwed, especially considering that he stole money in order to fund this escapade.
Yeah, he's truly a very desperate man, but I like him as a character. I really enjoy him, and I also enjoy how he treats Kaiji later, and how even later on he is super suspicious when Kaiji tries to repay him. I think he's like a very not realistic depiction. I don't know a guy like him in real life, but like I like the way he deals with Kaiji's shenanigans, basically, and it's just a very fun dynamic and interaction between him and Kaiji. And I also fucking love that they team up with Endo.
Yeah,
and that it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek that in the end Endo's like, haha, my contract has this super high interest rate, so in the end you don't win so much. It does feel like something Endo would do, but that
is exactly what Endo would do.
Yeah, it's a little bit, but it's supposed to feel sad that the grandness of the win is a little bit depleted by this. But of course we need to keep Kaiji motivated to go on with the series, which is why, just from a story sense, it makes a lot of sense. I am a big fan of Ichijo and his pure and utter hatred for the lower class, basically. He is ruthless, and it's just like Otsuki. It is a lot of fun to see him fail and get really desperate when all his traps that he set up and thought were never able to be overcome get overcome. And he's a joy. He's a joy to watch, similar to Otsuki. So honestly, in the past, I was always thinking that part 3 had my favorite villain with Muraoka. But I really like Ichijo and Otsuki as like a combined pair of villains in part 2. So what are your thoughts on the Borg, on everything, on the big water canisters in order to tilt the building? Is it on the same level as the glass stairs?
No, because the glass stairs, I think, is because the whole point of the sort of gambles in part one is Hyodo wanting to test these individuals for his own entertainment, and maybe in order to find someone competent to like help him run things or something like that, maybe even be a successor. Hyodo's idea is to test people by deliberately leaving certain things, certain gaps open, right?
Yeah.
So those glass stairs, even in the lottery, right?
Yeah.
Hyodo could have won on the first turn, but he chose to give Kaiji the chance to prove himself and figure things out.
He needs to get his thrills somewhere.
Exactly. Hyodo is looking to test people and get a thrill and see if they can figure it out and triumph. But the difference is Ichijo is not trying to test who's going to be the genius that beats me. No, Ichijo is trying to do everything in his power in order to win, right? So that he doesn't lose money, which he does, and he ends up owing Tei, what was it, 1 billion? No, less.
He has to go underground.
Hundreds of millions. He has to go underground for 1,000 years. So that's the difference, I think. Ichijo is just pure self-preservation, and he was not intending to leave any gaps open to just see if people can figure it out.
This is something that really is an ongoing theme between Muraoka, Ichijo, and Otsuki not so much, but both Ichijo and Muraoka are quite similar in this sense.
Well, no, I think Otsuki also doesn't want to be discovered, doesn't want to...
Yeah, it's all very much self-preservation. Yeah, I understand that. And which makes, all of them quite an enjoyable set of villains. And I think the reason why, I look here at the original ranking that I had, and I put part 2 as rank number 4, which now I totally disagree with after discussing it in more detail, which is quite nice. I love when this discussion gives new revelations like this. But when I think of part 2, I mainly think of the anime paints my mind a little bit, because I think of very drawn out shots of Kaiji sitting in front of the Borg, the sound of the pachinko balls falling down, the same things happening over and over again, and the pace being even slower than modern day One Piece. That's what always dragged it down in my mind.
I think that does have its charm, though, although it can be very unpleasant to watch.
Yeah. I've never rewatched part 2, actually, so I don't know if it would still bother me today or if I would find it epic. I would definitely be more curious now than before to give it a rewatch. All right. Looking at the time, we should definitely be moving on to Kaiji Part 3 and Muraoka. The thing is, now the parts get a lot more focused on singular gambles, so it will be a lot easier to cover them fully quickly because there's not so much variety. But of course, all of them are very long and they have all of the different moments, so you could make a part about every single Kaiji part. But we're here just to give our main thoughts, and I initially put Kaiji Part 3 as my second favorite.
Okay.
So this is I know I said it's like on a similar level to part 1, basically. So the variety that part 1 gives me similar joy to finally seeing Mahjong, I guess. But I will have to think about this ranking, especially after talking about part 1 again. It seems a lot more grand in its scope and complete in and of itself than just part 3. I do believe when I was thinking about this ranking initially, I gave a lot of merit to the fact that only people that really enjoy Kaiji continue reading at this point, because this is manga only. So by default, I was feeling like, I need to enjoy it more than part 1 and part 2. And it is really good. I love the game of Minefield Mahjong. I mean, the both of us are playing it. The viewers have seen us play it, and it's a blast to play. I love that the location is suddenly this seedy upstairs apartment casino, and we just go in the back office of Muraoka, and I think it just left a big impression on me the first time I read it, because I didn't have a clue of Mahjong back then, but now after learning Mahjong, you realize, okay, this kind of game is very, very, very far away from actual Mahjong, and especially the way the manga is written, you really don't need Mahjong knowledge to 1000% enjoy it. This was at least my opinion on the reread. Feel free to disagree, but it is a lot more about the cheating aspect than about the Mahjong aspect.
Yes.
When you do play Minefield Mahjong yourself, you need to have a lot of knowledge about Mahjong to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But reading it, in my opinion, you can read it without knowing Mahjong. Yeah. And I was more afraid than I should have been the first time around reading it. How many times have you read part 3?
Not that many.
At least 2 times, though, I'm assuming.
Yeah. But I mean, this is just my opinion. I think part 3 is more entertaining than meaningful. You know, because in part 1, you have a lot of interesting themes about how, you know, money is so important in this society, and it makes people exploit others, and everyone's just like looking to hurt other people just for the sake of money. And then part 2 has a sort of similar theme, you know, with being underground. It's just like real life. When you have certain goals but you get ground down, you get tired, and then that makes you weak to other temptations, right? These are all very interesting themes, in my opinion. Whereas what kind of themes are explored in part 3? We have the betrayal, which we had like 2 times. We've had quite a few betrayals in Kaiji already.
Yeah. We have the pure patheticness that is Muraoka.
Yeah.
Like the desperateness reaches just new levels.
Doing whatever is easy.
Literally, and I can't believe that the twist is literally like putting a sticker on a tile to make it look like a Haku.
Yeah, so that's what I think. I think part 3 is just entertaining to watch the Mahjong, and also the cheating. I really like because, you know, we can hate on Muraoka and call him pathetic, but I really did think it was impressive when he did the
turning everything around. Or
no, that's pathetic. Just like waiting till someone leaves the room and like flipping the tiles over. No, I was referring to the bit where he's deciding on, he has 2 risky tiles. He doesn't know which one is which, because it's been concealed from Maeda, who's spying. And so while he's like holding the 2 tiles, he kind of puts Kaiji's focus on those 2 tiles that he's holding, and then kind of picks up another tile in his hand, and then, you know, through concealing it behind his fingers, he basically changes his hand. So he's still in Tenpai, but changes it so that he can discard a safe tile. I really did like that moment. I thought that was a very cool moment from Muraoka.
That is quite awesome, and these kind of movements also have inspired me when I play both regular Mahjong or Minefield Mahjong to look out for hand movements more, maybe make my opponent think that I'm going for cheat-toy hands by picking up pairs of 2 tiles when realistically I'm just having a regular maybe Tanya or Pinfu hand. So he does have skill. And honestly, one of my favorite Kaiji moments of all time is the moment that Muraoka, because he's like a hound, you know, he sniffs it out. Similar
I know what
to
you're gonna
Endo.
say.
The moment Muraoka realizes that Kaiji is onto something, just like Actually, I do really want to read the manga volume for this because I want to see if it's with the page turn. You suddenly see his deadpan expression where he like fully understands. And on my reread, on my most recent reread, I was quite shocked how little of time Kaiji actually has an advantage of knowing that he is being cheated without Muraoka knowing that he knows. It is like only for a few chapters max until Muraoka basically instantly realizes it. When I was thinking back to when I first read the part, I thought it was like, oh, Kaiji uses like this advantage in knowledge in trying to overcome Muraoka. But no, it is the battle of both people knowing and both people knowing that the other one is knowing that this cheating is going on, and it builds from there, which in my eyes is even more impressive than just Kaiji using this difference in knowledge for his advantage.
Yeah, that really is a fantastic panel because of the context. Because on its own, you just see like a full page panel of a guy looking kind of how to describe it, like
ambivalent,
disenchanted, like just lackluster, no energy. But it's because he was so animated before, putting on this big smile, this big show of being a magnanimous showman.
Exactly.
Oh, please, by all means, take a seat, Kaiji-kun. And everything that came before, and then the panel is suddenly that face.
It is just brilliant.
Fantastic.
So, you hit the nail on the head at the beginning when you said part 3 is very entertaining. It does not explore the human psyche all too much. It is it shorter chapter wise actually? I'm not so sure about
maybe a little bit actually.
Yeah. Before we still have not mentioned one important part about part 3. That is the fact that it's not Kaiji and Muraoka alone. Maybe you were thinking of a different part.
No, when you said the important thing about it that we haven't mentioned, I thought you were going to mention the introduction where he's living at Sakazuki's house.
Ah, of course, yeah. So this is also part of Kaiji Part 2, and I was talking about the introduction of Kazuya and Kaiji like slowly starting to realize who that is, and like already the seed of their interactions and their banter is being planted. But let's start first with Kaiji's bum life and being forced to get kicked out. Is this something you can relate to?
Relate to? I don't think anyone should strive to relate to Kaiji.
Yes.
Well, what do you have to say about it? I'm still gathering my thoughts.
Yeah, no worries about that. So I fully can understand that after like we talk about people having issues with dopamine, and dopamine is also like a topic in Kaiji Part 3 where Muraoka talks about like maybe he puts on the show and or actually he gets his actual dopamine from it. But Kaiji is a clear dopamine addict, and after having these huge life-changing gambles, just suddenly lounging around like that, it makes a lot of sense because at that point his brain is already fried. He can only get his sort of thrill out of these things. So who knows, maybe Kazuya actually fully senses that also and tries to take advantage of Kaiji at the beginning before then realizing, hey, this guy is actually interesting. I want to have an actual battle of wits with him, because later on in Kaiji Part 4, Kazuya at first actually does like almost toy around a little bit with not only the people in the game, the Chang and Mario, but also with Kaiji, because he like shows him this gruesome display and is like, hey, take a look at this. So I feel like Kazuya needs a while to understand what he really thinks about Kaiji. But yeah, at the beginning, I do feel like he seems like someone to take opportunity to make use of the fact that his brain is completely dopamine fried and that he always needs to seek the next big thrill to get him motivated for anything. Though, just as a quick disclaimer, I do have the feeling that it may be a good idea also for the viewers to, we've been talking a lot about parts, to split our discussion of the Kaiji parts equally into parts. We have the first part 1 to 3, and then in the next episode we could discuss episode 4 to 6.
We could do that if you want, but I'll just say right now, I don't have much to say about 4, 5, and 6.
Scandalous. Should we move on to them then right now?
Yeah, maybe I'll just leave it to you because what's there to say? Yeah, I just don't have much to say about
Oh,
it.
damn. Okay, I'm starting to question myself because in my original ranking, one poker.
I have some negative things to say.
Yeah, one. You know what? Then screw my idea. Let's. You got me hooked now. I want to know what you think of the second half. So maybe you guys will have to enjoy our discussions for just a little bit longer. But I believe
The
in you
ladies
guys.
love it when you listen to our podcast and endure through it.
We've said it before and we'll say it again. So after Kaiji magnificently beats Muraoka, another fantastic breakdown. If any of you guys know the video game series Ace Attorney, the breakdown, the catharsis after bringing down the bad guys is just the best, and Kaiji nails it every time. After getting introduced to Kazuya, Kazuya takes Kaiji on a little ride to the graveyard first, where he
Yes.
shows Kaiji his own grave, or does this happen before one poker? Things.
I think it was the beginning of part 4.
Kazuya Hen.
I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah. At some point, Kazuya shows Kaiji a gravestone of himself. But first, they of course look at the gamble of Chang, Mario.
And let me just cut in.
Yeah.
Is that necessary? Because people were dying in part 1, the steel beam crossing, and they were the people who lost the gamble in the Espoir.
Yeah.
I think they went underground, right? But at the beginning, we sort of think, oh, are they gonna have like drugs tested on them? Are they gonna be killed? Have their organs harvested and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So, and people do die underground. You have that room where people are coughing, they're too sick to work, and probably a lot of them do die, right?
Yeah, of course.
Do they need graves? Do they need this whole theatrical showmanship of, oh, look, I made a grave for you in case you die in the Goomble? I think it's very unnecessary, and maybe this is more reflective of the character Kazuya.
I was
rather
about
than
to say,
the
this is
writing.
exactly what Kazuya is supposed to be all about. This kind of unnecessary, flashy showmanship. I mean, that's literally the entirety of part 4 is Kazuya trying to, I don't know, flex on Kaiji, trying to impress him, talking about his worldview, talking about his novel.
His book,
and just like just trying desperately while Kaiji is there like, what the fuck is even going on? You're insane, It, to me, shows that Kazuya is literally completely disillusional, living in his own world, where because he grew up from young, living in this kind of world where he has literally unlimited access to anything he could ever imagine in his life.
Interesting parallel, because that reminds me of Buraiden Guy, when Guy sort of sees how impudently his fellow classmates are acting, like talking about, oh, my parents, they're fucking, I hate them, they don't give me enough allowance, and they told me to stop playing video games, so I fucking smacked my mom in the face or something. and
could have been Kazuya.
he kind of gets the reaches the conclusion from that you don't have reality until you are depending solely on yourself, basically. Because these kids are so ungrateful to their parents because they don't know what it's like to have to basically work in order to have everything that they do have.
Exactly.
Do I call it a privilege of like having a house to live in, having enough food and stuff like that, these basics? Well, usually probably in those times and in Japan, like probably just the dad is working and the mom is a housewife most of the time. But
I'm no historian, but who knows?
Well, anyway, whoever it is, like the mom's taking care of the house or maybe working. The dad is working in order to make that possible, and the kids just don't understand that, and that's why, like you say, they're living in their own world.
Exactly.
So I think there's a bit of a parallel there.
I do feel like Kazuya is more than just the Omega most spoiled brat in the entire universe. There is a lot of tragic things about his character also, and
A lot. I think there's like just one of. Go. Sorry, I'll let you talk because I don't really remember it. I'm not a fan of it, so if you find it interesting, you can
absolutely
gush about it. Maybe you'll even convince me, change my mind and make me start liking it again.
Yeah, makes it quite challenging after starting with the bombastic first 3 parts and already having a lot of heated discussion, but I will be doing my best. So I know what you wanted to say right now, that the one tragic part is
when he falls into the
but
sea.
That's not what I mean with that he's a tragic character. I feel like his entire being and his upbringing and the way that he thinks like that, that is the tragic part, you know? He is just deeply inside and utterly sad, and his entire existence is just completely surface level. And for part of it, he acknowledges this and he says like, all these people are just fake. So for a little bit part of it, he does know that he just perceives the world, or the people perceive him on a very surface level, but he literally, it's impossible for him. Okay, maybe he can if just say like, you know what, he runs away from home and leaves everything behind, and then he can get to experience the world. But he's like saying all these assumptions and how people think of him without ever having been in the situation to ever experience a different perspective on life. So in my opinion, he just spouts nonsense. He's just such a sad, pathetic character, which contrasts really well about Kaiji, who's been through so much shit, you know? I feel like compared to Hyodo, who is actually caricaturized, I don't think that Kazuya is just, a spoiled brat, look at his tragic backstory, he thinks his novels are so epic. No, it's a very tragic tale of a man who, maybe I'm also interpreting things too much into it, but I actually enjoy the second half of Kaiji. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I did put part 4 as the worst of them all. Really? It's like a short intermezzo. We could have the introduction of the
well, you say it's you've got it at the bottom of your list. So what didn't you like about it then?
Yeah, so the gamble itself is not really interesting. It gets very repetitive. I don't like the mock-up that Kazuya is like, it's a psychological experiment that we're going for interviews in between the rounds because I want to write my novel and I want to have like the real... That's stupid. I know I just said that's like part of the theatricalness of Kazuya and the patheticness and sadness, but that doesn't mean that I must enjoy reading about it and listening about it. He does not spout so much nonsense about his novel later on in One Poker Hand, but there it's much more focused on the actual gamble. So there are not many mind games, just like misunderstandings. It's quite a bold choice of Fukumoto to suddenly pick a gamble where our main character is not actively involved, but literally just watching from the outside, literally behind like a glass wall, and he can't do anything, you know. So
he can't do anything.
He has the power of money on his side, of course, and saving them in the end, but like he cannot like actively influence the 3 of them, you know.
And I thought that was a very interesting choice. Okay, wait, do you want to finish your train of thought? Or
exactly. Let me just finish because this actually makes me appreciate part 4 for what it is, because it's a bold perspective change to suddenly have the gamble happen out of the realm of Kaiji. It gives us insights of how he perceives it when other people gamble, because he's basically put in the a position where normally the reader is for when observing Kaiji, and now suddenly it is like Kaiji joins us behind the fourth wall, which is literally the glass wall, and we are observing the gamble together with Kaiji, and normally we feel for Kaiji, but now we feel with Kaiji, and we go through like the woes and like the oohs and ahs that he has when observing this gamble, and this is something we can only get when there is a gamble where Kaiji himself is not involved. And this requires, first of all, a completely different style of storytelling compared to the rest of the series, because it's suddenly not about just the main protagonist anymore, which, credit where credit is due, is quite nice. And it's a little bit of a pace break. I say pace breaker, but part 3 is also like relatively
change of perspective.
Change of perspective. Yeah, that's why.
In a way, it's nice to keep it fresh. Yeah,
exactly. So that's what I fully respect part 4 for. But I do prefer the introduction of Kazuya in part 3, and I'm happy that he already appears in part 3.
Yeah.
If part 4 would just start with Kaiji like walking out of the building, and then there being a car where he like is like, "Hey, come here for a gamble" or something, and that's the first time we get
come
to
in.
meet Kazuya.
I'm Hyodo's son, by the way.
Exactly. That would be the most pathetic thing of all time. So I'm very happy he gets introduced before that. But what do you... Let's stick with part 4 first. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I... you've been asking me, do I agree? Do I think it's reasonable? Do I think it's realistic for certain things to have happened the way they did? I'm not sure if I agree with... what's the guy's name? It begins with M.
The third one?
Yeah, not Chang, not Mario. Okay, it might.
Yeah.
Japanese dude.
Yeah, exactly.
The Japanese dude, I don't think it makes sense for him to just... Because what does he gain from like killing all his friends? He's gonna gain... How much money was it at the time? Because I don't think they got to the 100 million goal.
Yeah.
I can't remember how much money it was, but the difference between, what was it, like 16 million or 50 million?
Yeah. I hate his guts also.
No, I'm not even saying that I hate his guts. I'm saying I don't think it's realistic behavior even, because they've been through so much together. This will connect with the second thing I'm about to say in reference to Kaiji helping out a stranger with his own actual resources, his money. I remember panels where he sees Chang or Mario, homeless, sleeping under cardboard, and he doesn't have to help them. He doesn't have to do anything. It's not his business. But like he says, "Oh, come into my office or home. You can sleep here. It's warm. Hey, maybe you can work for me. Maybe I can give you a job and stuff like that." That kind of kindness, and then also that kindness is returned because he has was it one of his kidneys that he
yes, you're right.
He had hepatitis B or something,
a kidney disease.
Yeah, and basically Chang and Mario are like, can we be a match? Can we give you one of our kidneys? So that kind of level of closeness.
Yeah.
And then he somehow thinks that they might be trying to betray him and kill him for more money. I don't think it's realistic. I think when that kind of bond is made, I don't think, yes, they panicked and like Mario forgot to press the button in time. There was miscommunication, there were misunderstandings, but I don't think that just the fact that they can't talk to each other would make him like panic and decide to, like, partly out of fear and partly out of greed, kill Chang and Mario. I don't think it was realistic.
Now that you put it this way, I do realize that he is my least favorite part about Kaiji Part 4. Not because, I hate him because he's an evil guy and I don't like what
Yeah.
he's doing. A lot of people hate characters just because of that, but then literally you should hate everyone in Kaiji because everyone is miserable in some way or the other.
Hey,
But
what did Mikoko do wrong?
fair point, fair point. But I've been thinking so much about the Asian Threes relationship because I really like the dynamic between Kaiji, Chang, and Mario that
Yeah.
I completely forgot the dynamic between these original three.
The former Asian three.
The former Asian three, and honestly, you're completely right. This is the weakest part of Kaiji Part 4. I can't say what I want about how I love that there's a change of perspective. The actual gamble itself is quite weak, and then it is a quite daring thing to do to suddenly have a gamble about three people we've never met before, but this can be done in a good way, which is really, really difficult, and it can be done in a not so good way, which is unfortunately what happened here, because the dynamic and how it's built does not make it really believable, how their action does not make their actions in the end as believable, which is what makes it lose a lot of gravitas, because it's not so believable. The entire gamble feels a little bit pointless, and this point is driven down by Kaiji in the end being able to buy them out anyway,
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's, I think, why this part feels so superfluous, and we're like, what gives? And we, like I mentioned before, the things we learned about Kazuya there are not the ones that I really enjoy. It's like I don't care about all his novel writing stuff.
Yeah.
I don't care about the mini gamble in between the story with the swords.
The sword and the love or something.
Yeah. So we have like a perspective change in the arc, which is already a perspective change, which
Yeah.
but still that.
Yeah, and so the second thing that didn't really sit well with me was the fact that Kaiji had winnings of 240 something million.
Yeah.
Let's just say 250 million.
Yeah.
And he had to pay 40 something million in order to save Chang and Mario.
Which is like,
it's not. I'm not saying it's nothing, of course,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like think about the change from Kaiji having first of all, he was like drowning in debt, and then he lost his freedom, and then he was in the underground, and and then he's living with Sakazuki. That's a nice change, but it still sucks. He doesn't have his own place. He's like sponging off them for like to get an allowance for like some nice food, some beer, play some pachinko, and all he has to do in exchange is just keep Mikoko company.
Exactly.
But it's still not a great life, right?
Yeah.
240 something million, the amount that he won from Muraoka, he has the opportunity to completely change that. I think at the time, if I'm not mistaken, that's enough to buy like a really nice house. He can just buy it without having to get a mortgage or anything. He just has a house and he has a lot of extra cash left over to do whatever he wants with. He can just do whatever he wants, really. He can like do some kind of work in order to grow that money, or he can just chill,
Kaiji
be a bit
would
more
never
modest.
do that.
But my point is 0 to 200 and something million yen. That's a life-changing change of
But
money.
240 to 200.
Yeah, it's what is it? I mean, sure, it's not nice to have to part with that kind of money, but at the same time, like if he doesn't do that, then he's going to live with the guilt that he let 2 human beings die, and but also like I think it would be more interesting if he had to give up either all of his money or more, or go into debt again
in order to save them.
That would kind of, because it's just not a it's not a very heavy decision. Like it's kind of easy.
That would feel honestly like something Kazuya would do under normal circumstances if he had not planned from the very beginning to actually take Kaiji to the main event, which is one poker at that point. So it is clear from the beginning, unless I'm mistaken, maybe Kazuya says like, oh, you're a good guy, I actually do want to gamble. But I feel like he finds him already interesting during part 3, so I think he already has on his mind to take him to one poker. So with that in mind, it makes a little bit sense to me that he doesn't ask him to forfeit all of it because he wants him to have a little bit of war funds for one poker.
Yeah.
But I fully understand that your main issue is that the stakes are just non-existent, and it makes, because the framework is not there, it makes the part, it's one of many reasons we have mentioned that makes this part seem superfluous, or more superfluous than others. Because even like, let's say part 3, even though it's mainly entertaining, part 4 fails at the entertaining part because the gamble is not so not even really that interesting.
It's not the most entertaining. No, I'm very curious if, let's say Kaiji had won less money from Muraoka, and he needed to pay, basically go into debt, or let's say he needed to go into some debt in order to save Chang and Mario. I'm curious how it would have played out. I'll ask you, but I'll say my bit. In my opinion, I think he would have done it anyway, because Kaiji has had many moments in the past where he's just
100%.
He was like, for example, in part 1, he was like crying, like, all this, it's all about money.
He hates money.
He like starts kicking the tables. And in terms of Kaiji, does he value money over preventing human suffering? Well, he like uses up all his the money that he has to save Ishida.
Yes.
Ishida. He's in debt now. He's screwed, but he did it because he didn't want that poor mild-mannered salaryman to go to the camp, right?
Exactly.
What else? Okay, my mind's going blank. But basically, there have been examples where Kaiji has like given up
the 45 hours and everything.
He's given up the opportunity to have a lot of money for himself, even if it's like to pay off his debt that's dragging him down and making his life suck. He's like passed up on that to save others. So I think he would do the same if he had to go into debt in order to save Chang and Mario. That's what I think. What do you think?
I agree. This is just the type of character Kaiji is. I was just, while you were talking about this, reflecting like how I actually really enjoy our discussion of part 4 just now. I think it's the most detailed I've thought about part 4 so far, and because I couldn't really put my finger on like the parts that I like and dislike. It always just felt like this weird awkward middle child in between. Kaiji has a little bit of money and Kaiji has exorbitant amounts of money, where you need an entire arc to discuss how he gets rid of this money. Which brings us to, in my opinion, the main attraction, and I will die on this hill. It has left the biggest impression on me out of all of the parts when reading. I like One Poker the most out of all Kaiji parts. For the reasons that I like the dynamic between Kazuya and Kaiji that I mentioned previously, I love the game of One Poker. I love the way, the relative simplicity, but I also, for some reason, the bullshittery that happens during One Poker, like the secret compartment and the secret compartment, I find them really endearing. And it's so unfair compared to us ranting about the glass stairs for half an hour. But, okay, one can say, oh, it is hinted at because he has the shiny finger polish in the car, right?
Well, you know what? I'll make this very easy. I'll say my opinion on it. It's an ass pull. That's my bit over. You can talk about it.
Yeah, it's fair. No, you're not wrong with that. But for some reason, because it's not an complete ass pull, because Kaiji realizes that it happens and he finds a way to make use of it for himself also. Maybe it could have been framed.
I think him realizing it is also an ass pull.
Yeah, okay. The part is quite long, so do you remember how he exactly he tries to think where the aces comes from, right? He's like, there must be some pocket aces, because he realizes that the gameplay was off and that it's not that there was an illegal amount of aces played, but Kaiji was just feeling that the flow was off, and this started to make him think about also. And it's not like he met Kazuya for the first time, but he sat with him for the entirety of part 4, so he knows what what this guy is willing to do and what potential wild contraptions he can make. The entirety of Mother Sophie is already such a wild contraption, so I wouldn't say it's a 100% ass-pull that Kaiji realizes it exists. Its existence itself is an ass-pull, and they could have made it like in a more elegant way than having like a secret compartment where you need like a toothpick or like a braille dot on your fingernail to open. But yeah, this goes in the direction of having Borg parts made out of candy, having was it candy or like the
saccharin or
sugar, right? This is the same. I also find it endearing of the Borg.
Okay, I'm a bit confused. What do
do
you think that's an ass-pull? Because I think
things that could have probably
that was
been
Kaiji's
solved.
planning. Kaiji knew that he needed an elaborate plan in order to beat the mechanisms.
I'm not directly comparing it, but just like the feeling that I get of they could have maybe solved it in a less contrived, more grounded way of doing it. They could have had like a more easily accessible. They didn't have to be this part with the shiny nail polish. Maybe it's again Fukumoto's obsession with hands and fingers that he put this in there.
You're more obsessed.
Could very much be the case, but still, I find the idea of like having this secret compartment and then a secret compartment, adding on layers upon layers, very endearing. I think the perspective, I mean, one of my favorite parts of Kaiji in general is having and of any Fukumoto works, we mentioned that in part 1, is the perspective changes, suddenly seeing what the opponent is thinking and us not really getting to see what Kaiji thinks. So in that sense, actually, the perspective change in between characters has happened before. We switch like to Muraoka thinking about Kaiji, but what makes part 4 is unique that we switch the perspective to like completely the outside. But still, perspective changes do happen. I love learning about the intricacies of Kazuya. I even, for some reason, even though it goes in the same direction as a secret compartment, I like the chair falling down and like this spinning net. It just seems, after learning about what type of absolute insane and sad person Kazuya is, it seems like the thing he would come up with, which is just...
It's interesting to note the difference between... interesting, because it's all right. Let me gather my thoughts.
No worries.
It's interesting to see how Hyodo plays with and tests his subjects. Hyodo, you could argue, well, the glass stairs being a bit of an ass-pull, but other than that, it's like, it's a test of their actual ability. Like, what, it's not just, are they lucky, you know? It's like, can they, like, come up with a method in order to get through this alive and survive and maybe even win?
Yeah.
Whereas Kazuya, in my opinion, the whole like secret compartments are an ass-pull. It's not fair like the Hyodo gambles were. No,
it's not fair at all.
It's not fair at all. You need in order to access the secret compartment, you need toothpick?
The golden toothpick.
Is it gold or even diamond? I think
like gold with diamonds attached to it.
You need some special toothpick in order to access the first compartment, and you need something in your nails to access the second one. It's unfair. It's not really a test of does this guy have the ability to triumph. It's like, I have the advantage, screw you.
Yeah.
And also and like the spinning net bit, maybe there's a way to logically figure it out, but it's all down to chance as well.
And I'm quite surprised he didn't rig this part to always catch him, by the way, because...
Well, I think the whole thing about Mother Sophie is that it's equal on both sides.
Yeah, and he allows Kaiji to pick a seat also at the beginning because he set it up in a way that it's...
But if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but I think if I remember correctly, they typed their names in to the machine.
Yeah.
So there could be a way. It doesn't matter what seat they pick. They could. The machine could know where Kazuya is. But perhaps maybe Kazuya didn't want that because like you mentioned, he's had such a sheltered life. He's his interactions with people have been so fake. They suck up to him when they hope to like get money from him, and whenever danger comes around, then they don't want to know him.
Yeah.
He's just been just had a very sheltered life, and he's never experienced the reality that I mentioned, as defined in Buraiden Gai, relying on your own self and experiencing the world in that sort of way. So maybe that was his way, making that part of the gamble fair. The real possibility of real consequences. He wanted to experience that.
Yeah.
Have that risk
and get the thrill from this.
Yeah, not just thrill, but like
life
reality.
experience. Yeah, try to get a taste of reality in his own really twisted way. Oh, I'm gonna get a taste of reality. Builds a gigantic, convoluted construct. We need an elevator to go up and everything. I must say, I love the aesthetic of betting the human lives.
Oh yes,
these statues which look like
gold representing the money that someone earns in their lifetime, and then red for the actual life.
Yes,
that was great. Yeah,
and then also like wait, correct me on this. Actually, this is, I know people start hating I say it's my favorite part, but I have actually not reread it in a long time, so I don't remember the details. Does Kazuya in the end use red life also for betting? Or...
Well, I think he must do, because he ends up losing.
I do have the and like his realization, because I have this explicit memory of his realization that like he's running out of the lives to use, and that he also it didn't even come to my mind in the first place that, oh shit, of course he also has a red life to play, because at the beginning the red lives only come into play because Chang and Mario sacrificed themselves, you know, they gambled themselves away. And I also really like that they are present. I like that it's not just Kaiji versus Kazuya. I think this could get boring over such a long
I think that's a little something that I don't really understand. I'm not sure why he asked the black suit to go stand outside, but Chang and Mario were allowed to be there. Why was that? I mean, maybe you remember better than me.
I do not, and that is quite a curious decision. And normally we'd have black suits observing gambles.
Yes.
It's not something that is like unspoken. So this discussion gets me really motivated to reread part 5 also, because the reason for me, the entertainment factor is maximum. It's for me the best Kaiji gamble. I love the back and forth. I love also the conclusion, you know. I don't know if you remember the final showdown of the cards. By the way, the aesthetic of like the cards slowly flipping over, it's also for me peak. But you have the dynamic of the cards, you know, with the ace losing against the 2, and then
similar to, of course, E-card.
But then to think that in the end it will come down, and so this actually makes 2 not the weakest card in the game, because 2 actually wins against ace, which is the strongest card in the game, but 3, which only wins against 2, is actually the weakest card of them all. And to have this dynamic come into play for the final showdown is something I was like thinking, what will like the final showdown of cards be? And maybe I was stupid back when I read it, but I did not expect this to be the final 2 cards that were selected, because it didn't even cross my mind, and that this would be the final outcome. If it were any cheap gambling story, I feel like, oh, the ending would just be the 2 wins over the ace, you know. That feels like the cheap way of ending this. Oh, the underdog overcomes the strongest card of them all. But no, instead, that's not the case. So I love the ending. I love the entertainment factor of the gamble. I for some reason can give slack to the convoluted contraptions, because I like convoluted contraptions. I love seeing Kazuya going into full despair and just like bursting out and crying when his chair slowly reclines. Maybe even there's a little horror aspect in this entire machine setup, you know, a little bit Saw-esque. Let's play a game, you strap yourself in, and
well, you could say that about a lot of the contraptions in part 1.
Of course. But here it's literally like, okay, we don't stop until the game is over. But you're right, you know, the Tonegawa ear and eye devices, that's also very...
Tonegawa kneeling device, the drill into the ear, just the Brave Man Road itself.
We didn't mention it in part 1, but I love these kind of like horror-esque aspects of Kaiji. Yeah, I think the weakest part of part 5 is the flashback about Kazuya's backstory. And I know I said like this is not the only sad and sentimental thing about it, but how I remember it, it is written in a way that like the reader is supposed to feel like at least a little bad about Kazuya, which I feel like
I
this
can't
is the
remember what
mark.
happened. Did he fell into the water, and then someone saved him? It might have been the maid or something.
And
So what was sad about that story? What was the sad thing?
his brother, you remember how his brother was involved?
No.
Okay. Maybe now you got myself doubting. I will not put this up for the discussion because I also you see it's
I thought it was your favorite part, man.
I just told you don't call me out for not remembering everything. I need to reread it. Part 5 I only read once, many of the other parts I read twice, but 5 and 6 I've not reread so far, just as a disclaimer. But maybe that just points out once again that this backstory is the weakest part of all of part 5 because it's supposed to leave any kind of impact, but it misses the mark.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like something, his mother thought his brother did something and the brother got the credit, and the mother only paid attention to the brother while he was almost drowning, and then the maid rescued him, something like that. And it's like trying... maybe if I reread it, I find out that it's not supposed to actually make you feel empathy, but it's again Fukumoto trying to show how pathetic Kazuya is in this, like being his one begrudging memory that he ponders about his entire life. But yeah, that is the clear weak point. Doesn't stop it from being peak.
I think what you just mentioned about maybe that's not meant to. That's not supposed to be. Make the audience sympathetic to Kazuya, but it's meant to like show how he's pathetic and tries to justify himself. So basically, a bit more meta, right?
Yeah.
I would argue that Fukumoto has become less meta as time has gone on.
I agree.
So maybe not.
I
don't
agree.
know.
No.
You know part 5 better than I do. You have more of a recollection, so I don't know. Whatever.
So this brings us to part 6. Actually, I'm curious, where would you rank part 5? Or would you just say 1 and 2 peak, then 3?
Yeah, 1 and 2 peak, 3 entertaining but not life-changing, and then 4 and 5. Which one do I like more? I think I think they're roughly on the same level for me, below part 3, 4 and 5. That is. Maybe 4 is slightly higher because you at least get.
Wow!
You see some kind of camaraderie. No, wait. Well, which
but the
one?
Quality of the gamble.
Which one? Which was the one where was that 4 or 5 where you hear Chang and Mario's backstory?
I was just now thinking about this also. I mean, the big problem is that all of this is like sometimes also packaged as Kazuya Hen, that 4 and 5 are like seen as together, and then sometimes 4, 5 and 6 are even seen as this grand epic.
Well, okay, I'll make it very easy. 1 and 2 peak, 3 entertaining but below 1 and 2, 4 and 5 on the same level, below 3, and then 6 taking its place neatly at the bottom.
All right. If we are like, we do have to talk at least a little bit about part 6 still. It is still ongoing, so things can change, but we do need to discuss how, especially have a talk about Hyodo. But just because you gave your ranking like this, how I have written it down is at the very top, part 5, followed up by part 1 and part 3. After our discussion, I feel like part 1 is a little bit higher than part 3. And then I put on the same level, and you will kill me for this, and also I disagree with this also now after our discussion. I put part 2 and part 6 on the same level, but our discussion gave me a lot of appreciation of part 2 just now, because I really realized that I love Ichijo and Otsuki.
And the fact that you put them together actually reminds me a little bit about an aspect, the aspect of comedy, which basically is significant in part 6. Like, it's always trying to be funny.
Yeah.
But there are some funny moments, for example, in part 2 and part 3 as well. So we can explore that as we start to talk about part 6.
Part 4 and part 5 are a lot less funny. But I put, for me, part 4 at the bottom, and after our discussion, even though I was in its corner, talking about that I do see the merits in the perspective change, just the not entertaining gamble and the flaw in the emotional logic behind the character's behavior puts, for me, part 4 at the bottom. But yeah, the placement of 3, 6, and 2 in all of this, who knows? I'll follow up on that during our next episode.
Mm-hmm.
So, part 6. Kaiji wins big. He saves Kazuya and goes on a gigantic heist. I really love the initial frantic scrambling, like as soon as they win and they try to like get away just from the building where one poker is being played, and there's already, am I remembering correctly that there's already like a car chase at the very beginning?
Yeah,
that they're trying to break through the barrier of that the black suits built, and it's like suddenly, like, I remember reading it and my pulse being like quite high. I'm like, wow, finally Kaiji has it.
That part
all.
was exciting.
And,
I actually did like that part. It was actually a bit reminiscent to classic Kaiji, being in these high risk situations, these tense. Not is it a gamble? You kind of are. It is in a way a gamble because you're making snap decisions on the spot, which will determine whether you survive and evade the black suits, or whether you're stopped and lose your money and potentially killed.
Yeah.
So in a way, that car chase, you could see it as a gamble. And
and honestly, these are also all the high points of part 6 that we tend to forget about, because we mainly think about the low parts. We think about the camping, we think about the zoophilism, we think about just bumming around and character interactions, and forget about I like Mario in the shopping mall. Like, actually, when those chapters released, I was like really looking forward to see how this will go from chapter to chapter. I love basically all the different chase sequences where they are suddenly followed by other people, which spawned out of the not supermarket, the shopping mall event. I like them trying to settle in again, trying to find a place where they finally feel safe again. But the moment they do feel safe and let the dog out and like just
and talk to the granny.
And bum around again, that's like the low points that we mainly remember. But then on the other hand, you have amazing chapters where you have Endo and Kaiji, and you just have like the door in between them, and you have Kaiji's grand escape on the motorcycle.
I did, because I keep talking about the logical, methodical aspect of people making their decisions in Kaiji of what to do, rather than leaving it to chance or just suddenly being inspired by this glassy stairs that I suddenly saw randomly. I really do like the way Endo is like very logical, very methodical. He thinks logically, and like not only does that guide his own decisions, but he is now managing a team of people.
Exactly.
And he's like dividing up the work. I really do like that aspect of part 6, at least.
And you have...
It's just the in air quotations, comedy, which in my opinion drags it so far down. Like, the car chase scene was not bad. The scene in the shopping mall was not bad. Endo planning out his hunts, dividing up all the work, thinking logically, what would I do if I were Kaiji? That's good. It's just the other stuff really ruins it for me.
I feel like the main takeaway from today's discussion I have is that I will be rereading part 5 and part 6 now that part 6 is basically almost completed. I can read it in its entirety, because both of these...
Completed or given up on?
Both of these, like this was the first time in Kaiji actually where I had to wait for things, you know.
Yeah.
So previously everything else I could like read in one fellow swoop, and here these two things that I didn't reread, I actually had to actively wait, which makes the pace feel even slower. So I do want to give it a fair shot and reread it and try to read both part 5 and then part 6 in larger bursts. Because I feel like there are actually also, despite the comedy that is there, I really like GM Kurosaki as a character, and
I'm gonna stop you there. What do you like about him? Because to me, he just seems kind of very neutral. I don't think he leaves much of an impression. He doesn't seem particularly ruthless. He doesn't seem particularly evil and sadistic, but he doesn't seem particularly nice and caring either.
That's
he just
what
seems very neutral. What do you think?
That's
what do you
what
like
makes
about him?
him so intriguing to me. You know, it's just like, how did this guy get into this position? He must know what he's doing. He must be good with people and like controlling them, but he doesn't do it
Doesn't
in a
show
very
it.
exactly. He's not
a
like
very overt way.
yeah, not super stern like Tonegawa, who like very
mhm.
okay, is very forceful with everything, but he has like this aura of a gentleness over him, which makes him almost seem is not more threatening, but threatening in a different way compared to Tonegawa. You know, and this is something for another episode, our hopes and wishes for part 7. But I do feel like, and I don't think it's gonna happen. I do feel like Kaiji will just face off against Hyodo soon because Fukumoto wants to put this to rest. But if there was more time, I feel like a showdown between Kaiji and GM Kurosaki would be quite interesting because we don't know so much about his character yet. The things how that we could find out about him during a gamble, I feel like would be quite nice. And I see you laughing because all we know about him is he likes camping.
No, I was just laughing because of course the showdown in maybe part 7 or part 8 would be great, but I don't think it would come close to the more the massive showdown at the finale
Of
part
course.
10 with
Of course. This is we do have some.
Of course, it
insight.
can't come close to that. But
Yeah.
it would still be fun to watch the showdown with GM Kurosaki.
We do have some inside information, and we do know who's going to be a lot more challenging to face. And where
No,
the
I'm
chances-
sure they don't want to hear about that.
Yeah, okay.
They'd rather hear about gay camping.
Yeah, true. People that have listened this episode all the way to the end where we are right now, they are probably interested in this at that point. Because otherwise they wouldn't have read Kaiji Part 6.
Yeah, well, we'll have to leave them hanging, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so I think that puts a wrap for our discussion. Any closing
Is it?
thoughts?
Did you not have more to say about part 6? I kind
No,
of said that I like aspects of it, but I didn't like the comedy. I was also going to say that in part 2 there was some nice bits, and part 3 as well, nice bits of comedy where like just Sakazaki being Sakazaki.
Yeah.
My daughter's very beautiful, isn't she?
Yeah.
You want to marry her? No. And, just it's silly. It's not super intelligent. It's kind of stupid, but it's okay. First of all, the volume, how much of it there is, how many funny moments are there in part 2? Not very many, but it's nice to have them there occasionally to break the tension. Whereas in part 6, they kind of there's like a whole volume almost where it's just nothing but quote unquote funny. In my opinion, they're not that funny, but quote unquote funny interactions between the furniture store guy.
I find it funny how bad. I find it very crude entertainment in the fact how bad the humor is, which is why I enjoy it. But that's my twisted way of thinking. Just a quick glimpse into my dark, deep mind. There are 3 aspects.
I guess it's just a matter of personal taste. I like the humor a lot more in part 2, part 3. Not just the fact that there was less of it, but also
the way.
Yeah, it was more cool.
Yeah,
that's just what I think.
There were 3 more points I wanted to mention because I was rushing to the end a little bit too quickly. At what point does Kaiji give back the money to Sakazaki, or tries?
I think that's part 6.
Exactly. I really like this moment. That is, and their interaction after so much time has passed. Like, okay, in reality, it's just like the very long night. Like the second longest night Fukumoto has ever written, besides Akagi's longest night. So I really like this interaction.
I'm not sure if I do like it. Because in part 3, you kind of, and also sort of part 2, we get to know Sakazaki's character. He's in a desperate situation, you know, not earning enough money in his job as a, what was it, night patrol, night guard, security guard. And he gets swept into gambling, and then his perspective after he's made that big win is, okay, now I've won big, I have this nice house, and now it's time to quit while I'm ahead. It's time to cut. I'm not gonna like try and gamble again. That was just insanely lucky what happened there. I'm not someone who wants to gamble. I don't want to encourage people to gamble. No, I'm done with it. That was his mindset.
Yeah.
And he keeps that mindset because he thinks Kaiji is just hopeless. He's going to take that 3 million. I'm talking about part 3, of course.
Yeah.
He's going to take that 3 million and he's going to lose it, right? He's just a hopeless gambler. I need to get rid of him, give him money. Bye, Kaiji. I don't want to hear from you again.
Yeah.
I didn't like the shallow, again, kind of a bit of a caricature way that he was portrayed in part 6, because he was like, first he thought it was a trick, you know, oh, you're swindling me. I bet these bills are fake. I bet this is fake money. But then after that, he's like, Kaiji-kun, you can come anytime you like. I like you now. I don't hate you and think you're a pathetic gambler anymore. You know, gambled and made money. Great, come and see me because you're super rich now. If you can afford to give away 100 million to me, so it's just like he's not resolute in his mindset, right?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I just want to associate with people who have money. I thought Kaiji was broke, but he actually has money. Now I like him. I think it's a bit shallow.
He is flip-flopping around quite a bit in his way of thinking. So maybe if you would catch him on a different day, he would actually react differently to Kaiji trying to return his money. If he somehow had lost money again, and then Kaiji comes and says, hey, and then he would be like, oh, my savior, Kaiji-kun is back. So,
I mean, looking back on it now, maybe he is actually that shallow of a character.
Yeah.
maybe that's realistic.
I agree.
Because why doesn't he want him dating or impregnating and marrying Mikoko?
Calm thyself.
Well, that's what he was thinking about in part 3.
He was.
Why? Because he's, you know, trash, right?
Yeah.
But I guess now that he's got money, he's not trash. Yeah, he'd be able to like provide for his family if it were to come to that. So maybe that's why he now accepts Kaiji.
Yeah.
Now that he has money, obviously he's managed to make that money himself, and you know, now he has that money. He could use it to provide for Mikoko and his children. So maybe it's not that shallow. Maybe it's not that silly.
Yeah.
Maybe it makes sense.
The second part, that thing we still have yet to talk about is, or what I at least really enjoy about part 6, is how it goes. And I believe you enjoy this maybe a lot more when you are actually from Japan. I feel like this is something that gets lost with us gaijins. It's like the intricacies of creating bank accounts in Japan and the local kind of community living with the neighbor plates. I know a lot of people hate on the granny and stuff, but I feel like this could be the case of certain tropes that we just are not so familiar with, that may be a lot more common in this kind of community living situation, this like Japanese suburb. And then also like the hoops that they have to go through to actually deposit, and you know, like having the family stamp, needing to get that. These are all things I don't want to say, I don't want to be lazy and say like, oh, we just don't understand it because we're not Japanese people. I do feel like you can enjoy media as non-Japanese people.
I don't think it's that hard to understand.
I feel like maybe a little bit of nuance is missed though in these kind of interactions
Yeah, of
you
course.
have. So I feel like maybe I know people in Japan are also not really the biggest fans of Part 6 from
really?
what
I wonder why.
from what I have read online. So maybe you don't get anything secret out of being a Japanese person and reading it. But what do you
Maybe
think?
some of the wordplay, which needs to be explained away with the translators now.
Yeah, you're doing your best, guys. But what do you think about these intricacies of the bank accounts creation and like the suburb living, like how it goes into details of this and the problems that can come with it? Do you think it goes to unnecessary lengths in describing this? Could it have just been like, oh, Kaiji and his friends deposited it in bank accounts, or do you think?
No, I don't. Of course, when you need to do anything in civilization nowadays, there's lots of admin, there's lots of paperwork, so that's just how it is. I don't think that's particularly interesting or reasonable, unreasonable. I think it's standard, and of course.
But then it makes it seem that like you find it as unimportant to talk about if it's like standard and just like superfluous.
Well, I mean, of course,
Boring.
They needed to go through those lengths. They needed to have some kind of challenge, right? To deposit their money, make sure it's safe. So that makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, they don't go at some point after they've shown it a few times. Oh, they have to like dress up, and then the people have like the cards, so they have to change how they look. They go into all the like difficulties that they could potentially go through, but then at one point it's like, oh, okay, a few days pass and they've been regular. We don't painstakingly see every single transaction that they need to do, which I think is good. But for me, I don't think it's just like very standard to show all these potential issues that they can have. At least I've not read a work that does a similar thing, which is why I don't love it necessarily, but I respect Part 6 for going into this in a little bit more detail, because I don't know any other work that does it. But maybe they do it for a reason or don't do it for a reason. Who knows? So that was just something that's on my mind to bring up. And before we move on to the final missing point, which is the Hyodo in the room, I wanted to take just one moment and talk about one of my gripes with Part 6 being that the actual cover images of the collected volumes look really poor compared to previous kaiji mangas.
In what way? I don't think I remember looking at them.
Yeah, this is why I brought up here like an example, sorry for the low quality, of like the Part 22 volume.
Yeah.
It's just these like very weird compositions of Kaiji looking down on himself, or you just
and also
have
the
like
art style being like a bit more polished nowadays.
Of course, but it's more what my issue is like the composition of the shots. You always, I couldn't find the volume right now, but it's one about them where they drive in a van. Maybe the viewers will know which of the volumes it is. But you see once again this type of shot where you see like the Asian 3 in the background and as very tall figures, and then you see them like looking at the Asian 3 in the van driving on the street, and I'm like, this is not exciting. I don't want you have like a lot of these volumes where they just like stare into the distance with very unamused faces, while you have like similar kind of compositions like with the first volume of Part 3, for example. But when you take a look at what's going on here, you have Muraoka's crazy face in the background. It is a lot more dynamic, and it doesn't feel like static P. And like here's like a really side by side. Maybe we will put in the video actually.
We definitely should.
One or two of the volume images so the audience can understand better. But we have like side by side stock PNGs versus very dynamic shots, and I cannot comment if these are frames that actually happen in the manga for Part 3, but I know all of these shots for Part 6 are basically just colorized shots from the actual manga. Like I explicitly remember seeing this panel where they are looking at the contraption at this specific flight of stairs. So this is just a personal gripe. I did wanted to find space to bring it up. What better place than the Kaiji episode?
Sure.
The covers did get kind of lazy, and they were much cooler in the past. Let's talk about Hyodo to wrap things up.
Just another thing I wanted to mention, something which I noticed. I'm trying to learn Japanese myself. I wouldn't consider myself fluent yet, but just something that I did notice when I was watching the anime. I could obviously hear the Japanese and see the subtitles. When I was watching Kaiji for the first time as like a 16 or 17-year-old, I didn't know any Japanese, so I was just relying on the subtitles. And something which I completely, went over my head, but rewatching it fairly recently, I did notice was the way that Kaiji speaks to specifically. I noticed this in Kurosaki because what it is he uses the casual form because the Japanese language conjugates differently. There's a casual form and a polite form of speaking. So and it literally changes like the ending of the verb that you use. We don't really have this in English. In English, if you want to be formal to someone, you might call them sir or madam or mom. But like you also, it's not rude if you don't say sir or madam. If in a given sentence. In some other languages, like German, you have Z.
Exactly.
And in Polish, you have pan albo pani. That's literally using the third person to refer someone in the second person. So like instead of saying you literally say, sir, would you like some drink? Would sir like something to drink?
Okay, I see. Interesting.
But that only affects the second person, the pronoun. That only gets affected in German and Polish.
Exactly.
Whereas in Japanese, like
verb.
basically the whole language, the whole way that you speak is affected by whether you're being casual with someone or polite. And basically, I noticed that Kaiji was using the casual form when he was begging Kurosaki to let him out because there was some stipulation that the 1 day outside pass is not only does it cost 500,000 perika, but also it needs to be approved by management. And basically what that meant was no one gets out in their first year. But like the way that Kaiji begged what's his name Kurosaki, he uses the casual form and it sounds really rude in my opinion.
Oh my god.
Sounds like he's really being like looking down on the guy like, hey man, yo, you should let me out, man. Yo, what's up? Instead of like, please sir, could you please let me out? I think it would make more sense to kind of be a little bit more formal, you know? So I thought that made Kaiji seem like a bit rough, a bit rude, you know? Paints him in a different light, you know, which you don't really see in the subtitles because you just see him just imploring, begging the guy, but you don't see how he's kind of like doing it in a rude way. So I thought that was interesting. But he also uses the casual form when like talking to Tonegawa and Hyodo, but then that's a bit more reasonable, I guess, because he's angry with them, he hates them, he does look down on them like these are you villains. So maybe that's the same kind of mindset he had towards Kurosaki, him being the number 2 of Hyodo. Maybe he just hated him by association.
No more Tonegawa Yukio, Te group number 2.
Number 2. Yeah, so that's another thing I wanted to mention about Kaiji.
Poor Gaijin souls.
Yeah, so what did you want to say about Hyodo?
I mean,
the flanderization?
So I mean, it's the point that you brought up, and the entire coma state of Kazuya. I like fully see what you mean. And there was, who knows if there was influence of the Tonegawa spin-off that caused this, or that like Fukumoto gave his okays for all of this. Hyodo at the very beginning almost seemed like this transcendent being, in his entire realm, this absolute powerful monarch and overlord. And now he's just an old man who punches people with his stick or slaps them. And it's like punishment. And he gets a little bit back into his old self, I feel like, even though the gamble quote unquote, is pathetic, the Endo tree jump arc. I feel like we see a little bit of his old self when, like, even though I hate looking at Endo, like, being like this begging and trying to appeal to Hyodo, I didn't really like that. It felt really weird, but Hyodo like showing like his devilish side and like offering this salvation, even though this is still untypical compared to what we discussed previously, that he gives people still a fair chance, for this, like he plays with Endo suddenly in a way where he gives him this chance, but he knows that it's impossible and he will
it's
die.
not only that, but I think it's just pointless in many ways.
And he's like, "Oh, you would die for me? Oh, prove it, huh?" Never mind.
So where does it again? What? First of all, how does it come about? How does it arise? Where does it spawn from? It comes literally from Endo doing a slip of the tongue. He wants to show how sorry he is, so he says something. Hyodo has mentioned, like, a lot of the time, that like words don't matter. Like, they tell you how sorry they are, but they don't pay their debts. So that's why they, I've made a device for them to really show how sorry they are. But like, you see, even that device has like a point to it. It acts as a deterrent for people to like default on their debts. You know, if people know that such a device exists, they're gonna make sure they pay their debts. Whereas this, what's gained out of it? Like, Hyodo gets some satisfaction because he's upset that Endo didn't manage to catch Kaiji. So, practically speaking, who, if not Endo, then who's gonna be doing the search for Kaiji? Endo is probably still the best candidate for, with his experience and his, like, he's dealt with Kaiji before. Who would do it other than Endo? What's the point of like hospitalizing or even killing this guy just because of some words that he chose to say? It doesn't.
I mean, Hyodo, we don't know much about him after everything. I don't want to cut him slack, but he is an old senile man and he is very distraught because of the coma with Kazuya. It doesn't feel so genuine because like he doesn't feel truly connected to Kazuya. It is more like he cries about him. He's like, oh, he reminds me of how in Spirited Away the witch cries about her baby. She goes like, oh, my poor little thing. But there's like actually not anything shown to try to understand why he cares so much in the first place. So it seems a little bit.
Yeah, I've never seen Spirited Away, but again.
Okay.
But again, Hyodo demonstrated the ability to not care about other people's pain. He's like stomping on people's not stomping, like standing on someone's broken leg, right? You see, Kaiji, when they feel pain, I feel nothing. What do you think about all the starving kids in Africa? Is their pain causing you pain? No, this doesn't cause me pain either. So I mean, it might be different when it's your son, but like the principle remains. Like, it's another human being. It's not Hyodo himself. It's another human being. Maybe Hyodo sees Kazuya more as like his not as another human being, but like
successor.
Yeah, his like just an extension of himself, basically. Like, this is
that would make the most sense.
The guy that has my DNA. This is literally just me, basically. This is a piece of me.
That would honestly make a lot of sense, but we need some interaction between Kazuya and Hyodo
that's another thing. That's another thing that's
up.
a bit disappointing about part 6 is that we barely.
It's such a tease.
Well, first of all, we don't see Hyodo and his reaction to the whole situation until quite a few chapters in, like almost 100, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And another thing is that, like, why did they assume that Kaiji and the other Asian
Charlie Mario,
the Asian 3 have stolen the money? Because maybe my memory is failing
here your
me.
memory is twisted. This part I actually can fully understand because Hyodo uses his twisted reasoning to basically say that they cheated. It is like when he says it, it feels like he knows that like in reality maybe it was a fair game, especially because he has faced off.
But I'm talking about the very beginning when they instantly take off and run away, assuming that the Tei will think that they
you mean that he
it.
sends them to chase them anyway? I thought you were referring to when...
No, because like when you see the scene, when you see that on the side where Kazuya was sitting,
Yeah.
that part of the machine, the chair is turned upside down, and Kazuya is sort of lying there.
Yeah. Dead
Would
or
you
alive,
not
you know.
assume? And Kaiji, how did he get out of the chair? Like, he must have won, obviously.
Yeah. Um, but still, it feels like thinking about.
Maybe I forget some details that were there. Probably there were
thinking
some
about
details there that made
Hyodo's
it look like.
Hyodo's reasoning, he is absolutely insane, and his sense of justice is completely twisted, and it feels completely unfair that he it doesn't. I mean, this does stand in conflict with his original, let's say, interpretation, where he does seem as cruel and
still
but
twisted,
fair
but
in his own way.
fair in a way. Yeah.
But here it's just fully unfair. I just hope we get to see an interaction of Hyodo and Kazuya and see if he just thinks of Kazuya like as his own extension, or in the worst case there's like actually like cheesy father-son love, which we don't feel at all, because Kazuya is like the least loved person in the entire series besides Hyodo himself.
Money isn't everything. Why don't we go fishing and then have some sushi together or something?
At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens. Oh man! And the very very final point, like as you mentioned, we only learn about it 100 chapters in, and I was so hyped to finally see what's up with Hyodo and Kazuya and see them again.
Yeah.
And then the payoff was like really disappointing and kind of awkward after all this build up. It wasn't handled well, which I'm a bit mad about. I felt like the big comeback and seeing what's with Kazuya and Hyodo's reaction, it could have left such an impact, and it could have made up for everything bad in part 6 in my opinion, but it fell flat. Or at least for me, like the comedy part and the epic parts even out, but then this moment could have been epic and make it really make the part really good, but yeah, it fell flat. So
I don't think anything can make up for those scenes with the animals
the dog. Yeah. I need to
in the guy's imagination.
I need to reread it, but there's no excusing that. Oh man, I see we hit the clean 230 mark. I think for now that is all.
Sure, sounds good.
We will be discussing about Kaiji part 1 to 6. If you guys want to hear our follow-up thoughts, maybe until then I will have reread a little bit. You will hear about it in the next episode. But otherwise, thanks everyone for listening, and see you in the next one.
Thanks for staying with us so long. See you in episode 4.